Welcome into another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Got 5 takeaways today. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. So the first takeaway, Brian Thomas is a superstar, and he is. He had 10 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 14 targets. Dominated the targets, especially now since Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram are all out. He ran the most routes of any Jaguars receiver, and he looked so good despite playing with Mac Jones. Interestingly, Brenton Strange, not Parker Washington, was the other main targets. 11 catches, 73 yards on 12 targets. Going to go under the radar because of Brian Thomas's 2 touchdowns, but Brenton Strange should be added in all Dynasty leagues, and there's no doubt about that. Cannot ignore that type of volume. However, what I'm going to focus on is I'm okay buying high on Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas is a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver. He's not that far off from the top 5. He's been more impressive so far than Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm going to have him ranked ahead of him after this week. 3 years younger or so than Amon-Ra or CeeDee Lamb. I think I'll still have those guys ahead, but it'll be close. Thomas, 14 games, 64 catches, 956 yards, 8 touchdowns, 99 targets, 4.6 catches, and 68.3 yards a game. He's good across the board. Very good rookie year. On his way to being elite, especially since he's done it with the chest injury and with Mac Jones playing a bunch of games. So, saw 2 deals for Brian Thomas. Number 1, buy him for Xavier Legette, DJ Moore, Deebo Samuel. 3 pieces of crap for 1 diamond. I take Brian Thomas here easily. Second one, buy Brian Thomas for Bo Nix. Yes, it's a super flex. I'd still much rather have Brian Thomas, who I think is elite, over Bo Nix, who I think could be good, but not going to be the level of player Brian Thomas is. Now, interestingly, my second takeaway from the same game, and Brian Thomas, who was amazing, was not even the biggest scorer in this game. That was Davante Adams, who had 9 catches, 198 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 12 targets. All of this happened in the second half. He was being shut out at the half. Now, Adams was amazing. Garrett Wilson, not so much. He did score, so he saved you for fantasy. 3 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets, but 2 of those catches were early, including the touchdown. Then he vanished. Wilson was angry, and I'm not a little angry, very angry on the sideline. I don't think Garrett Wilson is happy with Aaron Rodgers, the current setup, any of what's going on at all. Remember that Garrett Wilson is extension eligible after this year. I don't know. Could this be a problem for the Jets? I think it could be a problem. So we're going to take a look at that as the offseason goes on. I will say, I think Garrett Wilson is a very good wide receiver. My opinion has not changed. Still very highly ranked for me, but maybe not going to be quite what we wanted since the situation has never quite worked out for him. I think Davante Adams, we saw something this week. We saw a lot of great catches, a lot of great plays from Davante Adams. He's not done. Aaron Rodgers, I do think, is finished. I don't think any other team is going to put up with this. We've seen you can't win with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback over a whole season. But even though Rodgers is done for me, I think Adams is not. I think there are many teams that would be interested in having Adams as a top 2 wide receiver on that team next year. I think that would fit the bill for at least 10 to 15 teams. So he's going to be somewhere, and he's going to be someone we're still talking about. Am I going to be in on him? Probably not. Why not? Great question. So I do think Adams the next 2 weeks could be a league winner. But are we going to continue to see that age 32 and beyond? We never see that. Age 32 is the death age for wide receivers. You see like Jerry Rice, Larry Fitzgerald beat the age curve. Is Davante Adams those players? The odds are probably not. So now's a good time. Right now, if your trade deadline is not passed, to move on from Davante Adams. I kind of like this one. Add a 4th to get Brandon Ayuk. I'd rather have the years on Brandon Ayuk over whatever is left of Davante Adams' career. And then maybe I saw this one too. Davante Adams and Pat Freiermuth for 25 first. You probably can't get a 25 first for Adams straight up, but I would much rather just have the 25 first and move on over having these 2 players. But totally comfortable starting Davante Adams the next 2 weeks. So yeah, these are mostly for teams already eliminated from the playoffs. Takeaway number 3. The Jameis Winston experience ended, but Jerry Jeudy shined. So Winston was a horror show. I mean, it was bad on every level. in the Browns loss to the Chiefs. I told people to run away from this game. I didn't like the weather. It totally didn't deliver. 28 total points. Everything went wrong for the Browns. So the Nick Chubb broken foot. Cedric Tillman didn't play. David Njoku wasn't able to play. It all fell apart. It was just a disaster. Winston, 16 of 25 for 146 yards and 3 interceptions. She took 5 sacks, averaged 5.8 yards per attempt. It's not good. Not good enough. The Browns benched him for DTR in the fourth quarter. We know DTR is not the answer. Deshaun Watson sucks. I don't know what the Browns are going to do. I mean, Winston, we're seeing the old Winston now. We've seen that start to come on a little bit. Too many interceptions, too many turnovers. It's just, are you really going to win? You're going to have a winning NFL team with Jameis Winston. I don't think you are. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know what the Browns are going to do, but they might not bring Winston back. I don't know where Winston's going to be. I'm losing some faith that he's going to be a starting quarterback to open next season. But the only bright spot, and Jerome Ford was as well, but in the passing game, the only bright spot was Jerry Jeudy. 11 catches, 108 yards on 14 targets. All the production came with Winston, basically. It's getting hard to ignore it because he's the only wide receiver who did anything, and he had almost 2/3 of the Browns' receiving yards. But I would consider selling Jerry Jeudy. So why? The real question is, what unlocked Jerry Jeudy? Was it trading Amari Cooper, or was it the switch to Jameis Winston? Those happened at almost the same time. When Cooper was still there and playing with Deshaun Watson, Jeudy had 3.3 catches and 41.3 yards per game. Nothing special at all. Not on the fantasy radar in any way. And Amari Cooper was traded, and then Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles in that first game. So 3 QBs played in that game. So we really didn't get to see what would have happened without Amari Cooper, but with Deshaun Watson. We didn't see that. But the tear of Jerry Jeudy, the strong performances, started in week 8, which was Jameis Winston's first full game. And in those games, Jeudy has 49 catches, 786 yards, 3 touchdowns, 69 targets, 7 catches, and 112.3 yards per game. Now, some of that's been boosted by the games Cedric Tillman has missed. But regardless, he's pacing for 119 catches, 1,909 yards over 17-game season. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's not that good. We know that Jerry Jeudy is not a 1,900-yard receiver, but we can't just ignore him and sell him for nothing. So in order to sell Jerry Jeudy, I think I need something significant back. Now, this was my first idea. So I still don't think you can get a 25 first for Jeudy, but I take a 26 first. I don't buy it for Jerry Jeudy long term. My biggest reason to sell Jeudy now, if you still can, is that if Dorian Thompson-Robinson comes in and Jeudy sucks, this offer will not be there later. People won't remember this. They'll remember the last thing that happened, which was Jerry Jeudy not being as good. And then another similar offer. You add Rico Dowdle maybe to get a 25 first. I'd do that as well to move off of Jerry Jeudy. But overall, I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be a sell for me because he's going to be overvalued. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. Right now, I'm offering a 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You get my rankings, access to Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month or $3 a month using that promo and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both my Why You Should Join the Patreon videos on the channel. They're on the channel's home page. I will say I have already started doing 2025 rookie content on the Patreon. I think my strategy for that will be to make rookie content Patreon only until probably about April. And then you'll see some rookie content on the channel. But I do think it'll be Patreon only until then. Tried doing it on here last offseason. Just didn't land. So that'll be a Patreon exclusive until April. Hopefully people are interested in that and decide to sign up. With that said, let's jump into my next takeaway. So next up, the Bills' entire offense smashed, except Amari Cooper. After last week's 14-target game, I really thought Cooper was on his way to being a featured part of the passing game, but that did not happen, even though the Bills scored 48 points. Josh Allen was great, so he was amazing. I mean, 23 of 34 for 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11 carries for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was a wild game. I mean, he's cementing his MVP case. We all know Josh Allen is great. But he had plenty of room with passing yards to have passing weapons be good. Even though James Cook had 14 carries, 104 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and 1 catch for 28 yards. He led in snaps, but both Ty Johnson and Ray Davis got involved. Johnson was more impressive. I will say I'm nervous for Cook. I mean, it took 48 points for him to get there. Josh Allen ran in touchdowns on the first couple of drives and had almost as many carries as Cook. Cook didn't play that many snaps. I'm nervous for Cook. Cook might be a sell high too, just as a comment. But Ty Johnson kind of crushed the receiving game with his 5 catches for 114 yards, 2 carries, 9 yards. He outsnapped Ray Davis. Ray Davis is not going to be relevant. Cook was saved by his touchdowns, like I said, but Johnson kind of took that hammer to the passing game. Khalil Shakir was good. 6 catches, 39 yards, touchdown. The touchdown saved him, even though he did have 7 targets. He led wide receivers in route, run, and targets. Shakir right now is the Bills' top wide receiver. Keon Coleman had that 1 big catch for 64 yards on 2 targets. He actually played more snaps than Shakir, ran fewer routes, wasn't as involved. I like what I'm seeing from Keon Coleman overall, and I think he's developing into something we might be able to trust later on. Dalton Kincaid actually impressed me. 4 catches, 53 yards, and 7 targets, but he played fewer snaps and ran fewer routes than Dawson Knox. It was Kincaid's first week back from the injury, so I am hoping he gets more involved. But I did kind of like this performance. Amari Cooper, goose egg, no targets. 4th in wide receiver snaps behind Shakir, Coleman, and Matt Collins. Even Curtis Samuel had some snaps. Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid both outsnapped him and ran more routes. A lot of people forget this, but Amari Cooper is a free agent after the year. Are the Bills going to be the team that pays him the most? No, there's no way, because he's a rotational player for them. The Bills run so much 12 personnel with Kincaid and Knox, plus they have their running game. They have Shakir and Coleman on rookie deals. Are they going to pay Amari Cooper when another team would pay him more? I just don't see it. So I think Amari Cooper is going to be on another team heading into next year. Now, what does that mean? To me, I'd look at buying low on Keon Coleman. I still think he's the most valuable dynasty wide receiver on this team. He had been dealing with injuries, but returned to the leading snap role this week. And he's been good when he's been healthy. I think he becomes a full-time starter next year. And again, when he was healthy, he was there. He was in that role. Still just 21 years old, so he has time to develop. The Bills spend premium capital on him. So I don't think he's going anywhere. Couple of deals. I saw this one by Keon Coleman and a 25 first for Chase Brown. I like Brown, but not this much. I'd easily take Coleman on the first here. And then I saw this one, which interestingly happened after the Montgomery injury news. You could get Keon Coleman for David Montgomery. I'd rather have Coleman in Dynasty. This is a weird trade, but it was one in the trade database. Now, speaking of David Montgomery, lots changing with the Lions. So David Montgomery's MCL injury and the Lions' decimated defense has opened a fantasy goldmine. So the Lions have been a weird team for fantasy all year. They have so many great players, but earlier in the season, they had one of the best defenses in the league, 2 great running backs in Montgomery and Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, and Sam LaPorta. So it was impossible for all of them to eat every week. It was mostly Sam LaPorta and at times Jameson Williams being left out, and Amon-Ra sometimes always being good, but sometimes not giving us those high ceiling games. That was what was happening. Montgomery and Gibbs were actually pretty much always delivering. But over the past 3 weeks, the insanely long list of defensive injuries has caught up with them. They've allowed 20 or more points in every game, and it's gotten worse and worse. We have not seen the Lions take out all the starters game script in a while. I won't get into every defensive injury, but you could fill the entire NFL defense with just the injured Lions players. It is brutal. And to add to the list now, an injury on offense, David Montgomery tore his MCL in this game. So he had 5 carries for 4 yards, 4 catches for 31 yards, but he was totally ineffective, played an extremely low snap share. I think it's totally because of the injury. We saw him receiving treatment for the injury on the side, and he's going to miss the rest of the fantasy season. Some are saying that a playoff return in the NFC Championship or maybe the Super Bowl would be possible, but I doubt it. I mean, if it's any sort of torn MCL, I think that's probably it. But this injury consolidates the offense just enough for the rest of the team to all eat without needing this kind of game script. So Jared Goff was amazing. 38 of 59 for 494 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 carries, 13 yards. Goff was forced to air it out without Montgomery being effective and with no defense. And you're going to be able to trust Goff down the stretch. Without Montgomery, Goff odds of scoring touchdowns is suddenly much higher. Jahmyr Gibbs had 8 carries for 31 yards and a touchdown, but most importantly, the 5 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets through the passing game. The passing game usage is what we wanted to see. Gibbs has been used less there in 2024. It's been a more even receiving split between Gibbs and Montgomery than it was in 2023, which is interesting. Amon-Ra St. Brown erupted, 14 catches, 193 yards, a touchdown on 18 targets. I've always wanted to see Amon-Ra on a losing game script. Well, this is what it looks like. Elite wide receiver. He played really, really well. And then the big one, I think the biggest actual news here is Sam LaPorta. 7 catches, 111 yards on 10 targets. LaPorta, with Montgomery out, I think LaPorta is going to be more used in that short area. He will be a trustworthy start down the stretch as more of a mid tight end one instead of the low end tight end one he'd been before now. I do think we're seeing Sam LaPorta get healthier. I do think we're seeing that Sam LaPorta is emerging as I want to say Amon-Ra is the 1. And before it was Amon-Ra 1, Jameson Williams 2, Sam LaPorta 3. Now I think it's more Amon-Ra 1, Jameson Williams 2A, Sam LaPorta 2B. And if it's going to be that, then Sam LaPorta is going to be better. Jameson Williams is going to be worse. Despite all of the great things, Jameson Williams, just 3 catches for 37 yards, bailed out by the late touchdown, but just 5 targets, out-targeted by Tim Patrick. It's nice that Williams scored, but 5 targets isn't good enough when there's 59 passing attempts. Now, for me, I'd look to sell Jameson Williams. I like him, but the volume's just not there. In 12 games, 42 catches, 747 yards, 5 touchdowns, 68 targets, 3.5 catches, and 62.3 yards a game. So averaging 11 yards per target, 17.8 yards per reception. These are insane efficiency numbers. Usually when someone is insanely efficient without the volume, they're a high regression candidate. To me, I'm just not in on Jameson Williams. A couple of deals. Could you get Chris Olave and a second for Jameson Williams? I'd rather have the volume of Chris Olave, I think, even after all the concussion concerns. Or could you add a second to Jameson Williams to get Rome Odunze, who I still believe in as a high-end talent? That might be something that I'm interested in doing. But overall, I would look to sell Jameson Williams off the touchdown. So there's just too many injuries to cover. I'm not going to cover all of them, but this one has clarity. Nick Chubb broke his foot. He's going to miss the rest of the 2024 season. Turns 30 later this month. This year, 3.3 yards a carry. No receiving game usage. He's been horrible. I think he's done. It sucks, but he's 30. Foot injuries linger. I'm done with Nick Chubb. Second piece of injury. Ravens, or not injury, I guess. News. Ravens excused Diontae Johnson from practice. I'll excuse the audience from having to hear any more about Diontae Johnson. He's a complete waste of our time. With that said, we'll move into Patreon questions. One player that surpassed your expectation and one that's fallen way below expectations. Any lessons learned? Surpassed, for me, Josh Downs. Lesson with Downs is if a rookie wide receiver is talented, flashes a lot of production, we shouldn't dismiss them just because the team drafts another wide receiver. It's obvious in retrospect, but he was very productive as a rookie. Probably shouldn't have faded him as much as I did. Disappointed, Trey Benson. Lesson here, if you're a round 3 running back, you're not a guarantee to take the job from the incumbent starter, especially if that starter is a real starter, not just a placeholder. I did a Patreon write-up on this, but there is a big difference in track record between round 2 running backs and round 3 running backs. They're not the same. And grouping them all together as day 2 running backs has been a mistake. I think that's not something we should do moving forward. And that's something that I'm going to look at in my process going into this rookie class. Lastly, is Jalen Waddle going to be one of the most straightforward offseason buys given how bad public perception has been for 2024? I think so. Players who disappear in the fantasy playoffs and burn people in the fantasy playoffs are often buys because people are irrational. They take out their anger on those players. I've been disappointed in Waddle. Hasn't been nearly as bad if you don't look at the non-Tua games. The real issue with Waddle is it's been all or nothing. He's never had a middling game. It's either been almost 100 yards or below 60. So if his production had been a little bit more smoothed out instead of all at once, I don't think people would be quite as angry. But yes, I would be interested in buying Jalen Waddle, especially if there are late first or early second rookie picks on the clock where I'm not that interested in the player I would be drafting. If I could trade that pick for someone like Jalen Waddle, that might be something I'm interested in doing. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Patreon.com/fantasyadvice. Dynasty, start, sit, redraft, and more. 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You can sign up right there at the link. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all